One of the characteristics we find in a lot of poetry of all ages is anonymous. People not wanting to slap their name on something. I don't want credit for this, which is another way of saying I don't want blame. Just like posting something anonymously, you can introduce ideas or just sound off on something without having to fear so much about blowback. We get an anonymous poem in Song of Summer, which explicitly says song in the title. The idea here is that, yes, it was probably originally sung. Most lyric poetry was. Honestly, most epic poetry was too. The Iliad and the Odyssey were performed. Here we get something that would be an entertainment in a royal court, probably. The king and the queen, or whatever royal family members, are lying around doing kingly and queenly things. But like every human being, they need a little variety from the regular drudgery of running a principality or empire or whatever they want. So they have poets come in and write poems for them, sing the poems for them, often perform them, perhaps with music, perhaps with dancing even, and it's entertainment. You know, they didn't have Spotify. This is what they have to work with. Song of Summer is a great example of that, but it also deals with a tradition of poetry called the Goliardic tradition or style. Goliardic, again, pronunciation, I don't care. These are poets who generally a little bit edgy, a little bit fun, a little bit dirty from time to time. Those of you who think, oh, well, old poetry, God, it's just so dull. They're getting pretty saucy here. They tend to be also, the poets who were writing in this tend to be attached in one way or another to the church. There's a fair bit of scholarship that says that a lot of these poems, a lot of them anonymous, a lot of these poems are written by younger men who perhaps their older brothers, it's good to be the firstborn boy, the older brother inherits all of the family wealth, and the younger brother, you know, is kind of left out in the cold, has nothing to do. So traditionally, those are the ones who would go and join the church. It's a job. It gets them out of the house. It's a living. But it's not necessarily first on anyone's ambitions of this group. They are young men. They like drinking. They like carousing and doing lots of very ungodly things. But they're stuck. So the only way that they can express this side of themselves is through anonymous poetry. I believe they also had plenty of parties where, you know, you got to have a password to get in, and Lord knows what those were like. It's your average frat party. Here, it can be used as a way of criticizing their lives, taking out some of their frustrations, venting about the restrictions of conventional religiosity. the elephant in the room for them was always a surging movement within the church towards inquisition, which in the 1100s started to become a real thing, where heretics, well, I believe it was like 1100 and, I don't know, mid-century, mid-12th century or so, the Pope issued a decree, a papal bull, as it's called, that torture was okay for heretics. If you're not a good practicing Christian, you could be tortured until you fixed your ways. So these guys who were a little edgy, a little smart alecky, stayed underground with their thoughts, and they came out in the poetry. And just look how they go about it. The Song of Summer. The woodlands clothe the slender shoots of boughs laden with fruits. From high perches, wood pigeons sing songs to one and all. Here the turtle dove moans, here the thrush resounds, here an age-old song of blackbirds rings out, and the sparrow, not silent with its chatter, takes possession of the heights beneath the elms. Here the nightingale sings, delighting in leafy boughs, pours out a long warbling through the breeze. Solemnly and with tremulous voice the kite causes the sky to echo. The eagle, as it soars starward, sings upon the breezes. The lark sings and produces sounds and melodies. From above it swoops with a different melody as it touches ground. The swift swallow ever makes its call. The quail sings, the jackdaw resounds. Thus birds everywhere celebrate for everyone the song of summer. None among the birds is like the bee, who represents the ideal of chastity, if not she who bore Christ in her womb, inviolate. What the hell is that going on? This is chaos, right? It's just a bunch. What? All these birds? What's with the birds? Is this an old guy in the park feeding pigeons? Why are there so many birds? And not just a lot of birds, a lot of different birds. I see pigeons, turtle dove, thrush, blackbird, sparrow, nightingale, eagle, lark, swallow, quail, the jackdaw. That's a lot of birds. And they're all singing. Now, I don't know much about birds, but I know that they each have very individualized songs, right? People who are really big into birding can recognize a bird just by the song that it's twittering off in the distance. So you're getting, if nothing else, in this poem, you're getting this portrait of a cacophony of sounds. Of this bird, that bird, this bird, that bird, that bird, this bird, this bird, that bird, all over the place. Remarkably diverse sounds bouncing around. You don't have to have any special skill at reading to recognize that that is very conspicuous in the poem. Don't look at the last line or two just yet. If you just take it for that, this image of nature in a kind of chaotic profusion. This is supposed to be, and most poetry of the time had, a kind of pious bent, religious topics. They were circulating, certainly, in the minor realms of laity, people who work in churches but maybe haven't taken full orders yet. There's not that much going on here that's very Christianish. Nature? That sense of profusion and chaos. That doesn't seem very orderly. When you think of church stuff, you think it being very orderly and disciplined and focused. Here, you don't know what's going on. So you have to look at what they have and not what your preconceived ideas might be. They have this cacophony. They have a cacophony of nature, not necessarily human society or human culture. You have sounds that you don't necessarily understand. You might be able to identify the birds, the jackdaw and the lark and the nightingale and yada, 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 but they're all making individual sounds that maybe mean something very specific to them. You have no idea. But isn't that kind of what we all have to do on a daily basis with the world around us? That sense of activity, flourishing all over that you don't understand is kind of the human condition. The focus that this places on the birds and the birds' songs suggests maybe that's something that if we could only understand it, maybe then we would have an idea of what the birds are trying to say, what nature itself is trying to say. And if you peel back nature as a veil, who creates nature?
God.
Bingo! God creates nature. Nature is what we can thus read as evidence of God. Look at a sunset, look at a flower, experience the power of a strong windstorm. Nature is always a symbol in one way or another for God. Maybe God's mad and he's whipping up a devastating storm. Maybe nature itself is just so intricate and complex that it suggests or implies the mind of God. If we could only understand it. That image of the book of nature is a recurrent theme throughout the Middle Ages. The idea that the evidence of God is all around you, all you have to do is look. And here this poem is looking. It is looking at the noise of birds, the chaos and profusion of nature surrounding the listener, one after the other, after the other, after the other, browbeating you into the admission that you don't understand what the hell is being said here. You don't know what any of this means. But within that, there is a kind of fun about the idea of all these birds. Now again, this is the sort of thing that can be replicated to a degree in original language that because we are translating from Latin here, we lose. But there is a certain playfulness in the words getting bandied about, that quick pace, one thing after the other, after the other, after the other. We have to read that and let it play on us, and slowly it becomes a delight. Especially, let's say, if they have a little music underneath it, and you're laying around on a lazy winter day when it's just miserable out. I don't want to go outside, but hey, let's have a little bite to eat, bring in some drinks. We're all just going to kick back and enjoy this song.